Welcome to On the Ground Floor, a part of the Center for Worship Leadership Podcast Network here at Concordia University in Irvine, California. On the Ground Floor is an anecdotal podcast, a place you can come and learn from ministry leaders through the wisdom of their experience. Hosted by Matt Preston, we offer these conversations to garner that wisdom in your own ministry. Why on the ground floor? Well, sometimes it's important to get a 30,000-foot view of leadership, of theology, of philosophy, to talk about concepts and ideas. But then we bring these ideas to the ground floor, where you encourage and lead the local church. Join us for monthly conversations with real-life ministry leaders here on the ground floor.
Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of On the Ground Floor. I'm your host, Matt Preston, and whether you are watching this recorded webcast or listening from your favorite podcast app, we here at the Center for Worship Leadership want to say thank you for tuning in, and we cannot wait for you to hear what our panel has to say today. This month, we are going to be highlighting one of the episodes from Theology in Motion. It's another podcast produced by the Center for Worship Leadership, and it's called COVID-19, Incarnation, Excarnation, and Worship. And that was featured with special guest Joel Esch. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I want to encourage you guys to check it out, as the content Steve and Joel covered was excellent. And really, our conversation here today will only be scratching the surface of that discussion. Now, today, I want to introduce you guys to the panel assembled for this episode, and I cannot wait for you to meet them and to hear their struggles and their wins within their respective ministries. Maybe you're out there today and you're like me. We're 7 months into this COVID reality, and you're just asking God, you're asking yourself, you're asking others, when are things going to go back to normal? You know, when am I just going to be able to wake up in the morning and do what I used to do? Maybe you're struggling emotionally and you're feeling very worn down and isolated. Well, this space is a place where we can build a community and encourage one another by hearing stories from real life leaders that are out there in the trenches just like you. These leaders are here to be open, they're here to be honest, and encourage all of us moving forward with new perspectives or ideas. And with that, I want to open the ground floor panel by letting them introduce themselves. Guys, say hi, give us a brief overview in your ministry and your role within your organization, and then follow up with this question. What was the biggest thing your church wasn't prepared for when the shutdown first happened?
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Lee. I am a music director at a church called Redeemer Redwood City in Redwood City, California. We're right in the heart of Silicon Valley here in the Bay Area. I'm a music director here, and I also, like many people, have become a technical producer of online content in this online ministry world, which is really fun. It's stuff that I've dabbled in high school, and I'm glad that I get to use those things and stretch myself there. One thing that we weren't prepared for, I would say, is probably engaging our kids in our ministry. We have a K-8 school here, which is a huge part of our outreach in our mission field. And we have strong relationships with them, but going online and not being able to see them face to face, engaging them through Zoom and through online platforms has been a huge learning area for us in a generation that grew up with this technology, but also has really great social needs as well. So that's something we're continue to learn in.
Awesome.
My name is Joel Wetstein. I'm a multi-site director of worship at Woodbury Lutheran Church in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. I've been at the ministry thing for 23 years, and for the first time in 23 years, got something just that blindsided us and made us have to, rethink how we do everything that we do. Our church has 3 campuses. The oldest campus is 52 years old. We've got about a 6 or 7 year old campus that was a merger, and then a portable one. And gosh, I think the biggest thing that we weren't prepared for was, when a portable church loses its venue because schools shut down, we got to figure out what to do with the third of our population that used to have a home, and now they're homeless. In terms of, none of us were gathering for worship, and then you take a body that's just completely removed from, a gathering place, and only one of our 3 campuses was even prepared for any sort of broadcast, whatsoever. And then there it was as I've said, we had like these high, crazy voyeuristic security camera camera angles that made it feel like we shouldn't even be watching. And now suddenly it was supposed to be our primary audience, platform. So yeah, we had some technical challenges and, like you, Brandon, engagement, next step strategies, nothing like that for online. It was because it was all secondary, not primary. So yeah, happy to be here, guys. Thanks.
All right.
So I'm Kim, and I'm in St. Luke in Mesa, Arizona. I have been here for over 40 years and have seen many generations, have worked with many generations of families. And I do more the traditional end. I do the handbells, the choirs. I do the arts end of it, the decorating. And then I do a large part of my role is hospitality. And with the COVID, definitely hospitality got really pushed to the back, but it's such a vital part of our ministry. So I think we just weren't prepared. Again, same with the technical end of it. We'd always talked about different things, but we never had, we didn't have them in place. So we worked hard at getting those things in place. Also, I would agree with the other guys, the fact of engaging those that are younger and how were we going to do that. And now as it rode along, we got comfortable in that role, but then now it's how do you start bringing it back and maintaining some type of relationship with people.
Thanks for that, Kim. I think that struggle has been, I think all of us can kind of resonate with that. My name's Nathan. I serve here in Tustin, California at Peace Tustin. And we moved here right when the pandemic hit to be a pastor at this church. And so, it presented all kinds of challenges. I serve in a unique sort of dual parish context. I'm at St. John's in Orange and then deployed here to Peace Tustin to help revitalize the church. And so it's been, I think the first challenge that we had when we were here was that we actually did not have any social media presence at all at this church. And so it was starting from the ground floor to try and, okay, how are we going to leverage technology here? We didn't even have Wi-Fi in the church. So it was helping a church to embrace some of the new technology that's out there to communicate the gospel to people and get it out there to them.
All right. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. Hey, something that Steve brings up in the podcast, he talks about this Barna survey that came out this summer, and some of the findings that they found was, half of the church adults that had attended within the last 6 months or so had engaged church services online. 1/3 of practicing Christians, which had attended at least once a month before COVID, have not engaged church in a month. And yet at the same time, we're seeing that 40% of Protestant pastors are saying that they are having an increase in attendance with online gatherings. And the question there for you guys, is that true? Have you seen that in your own ministries right now as far as those numbers? And then if you are getting new people, where have you seen those people coming from within your, how are they reaching you guys? So throw it out to you guys.
All right, someone's got to start, right? We're all going to be polite and wait. So someone's got to start. So at Woodbury Lutheran Church, we recently sent out a survey, actually, because we were curious about this ourselves. You can read about Barna and everything, and we wanted to know what's happening with our people. And what was interesting is it revealed, well, first of all, most of the people that responded to our survey were actually like 60 and older, which was crazy. It was not what we were expecting. You might think that only the young people would respond to a digital survey. We had 700 people respond, though, to our survey that we sent out to our church. And actual facts from our church. 95% of the people who answered, so 95% of the 700 said that they had participated in online services. And 61% of those people said they were involved weekly and have stayed regular in their attendance. And then we had we had 22% that said they were on several times a month. So that's frequency. And then the other thing that we look at with some of our platform data is how long are people staying on within the time span. And that's what we keep working on as well. So I don't know, that's just a quick answer, Matt. I don't know, anybody else?
Yeah, Joel, I was going to say on the St. John side of my job, initially we saw kind of a groundswelling of people very interested in plugging in that way. But I think as the pandemic has sort of gone on, it's people are almost having fatigue with online engagement. So I think the struggle has been, how do we continually get people plugged in when they're tired of being on Zoom calls all day long for their meetings and things like that?
Nathan, I would agree with that too. We had that huge surge at the beginning, but what has been interesting, we have tapped in. We have a large elderly population in our parish. They have come to really appreciate online worship because they know they are very high risk, and even as things are getting better, it's still going to be a while before they're going to feel comfortable coming back to church. And they have found that they have really found a real niche in worshiping at home. And they'll share how, we sing the hymns on Sunday. And so they are actively engaging. And some of them, because we didn't have live stream before, now can worship, which they weren't able to.
How have you guys been weighing the participation of your congregation or the visitors that are coming in your online ministry? Have you know what I mean? Like, how do you guys determine, like, oh, we had a ton of participation this week?
I don't know. It's a difficult to do. You can look at the number of hits, and I think, as Joel mentioned, it's that length of time that people stay on. They come on, watch, and then they disappear. So I think it is hard to really evaluate that and to the value of and the quality. I think the best thing we try to do is keep the quality of our broadcast as good as possible, so people can engage in it.
Yeah, Kim, I really love what you said. Is that I think there's something to be said about the ability for quality content and production to engage people. Although it's not the end all be all, I think it's worth mentioning that it does have an effect on engagement, and so that's one way that we try to keep engagement too. Kim, is we also try to keep our quality up. We look at comments on our Facebook feed. We've gone with Facebook Premiere for our services here at Redeemer, and we look at the comments and the live viewers. And now in the last couple of months, it has stayed pretty consistent with which people comment and how many people tune in for the live premiere. But on the other hand, short of doing a survey like Joel's church and having stories from people, it's been hard to tell because we can't see the engagement live because people are at home, unless you're doing a Zoom service, which we are not. And so I've found that engagement, and maybe this is the wrong answer to the question or a different question, Matt, but I found for me, trusting engagement into the hands of the Spirit has been something that I've been learning, because we're doing the things we're called to do, but we're seeing less than we're used to. And so, because in terms of engagement, it's been an exercise of faith for us and our team.
Yeah, that's really true. That's a good point, Brandon. Something that Joel Esch brings up in the podcast too. He says the medium shapes the message and shapes the hearing of the word, and that's something that struck me in there. I guess some of the questions for you guys too. Another question is, what are some of the positives you've seen coming from this transition period for your church? Everyone's been thrown in to, circumstances that we just weren't prepared for. And there's a ton of things that we could go into of just like, man, we were really messing this up, or this is bad, or whatever. But what are some of those wins that you guys have seen that were just kind of super unexpected and, really have been encouraging for you guys?
I have a personal story to share there. Early on moving here, there was a gentleman named Al, and his health was declining. He had been in an assisted living facility, and as you know, at the early part of the pandemic, they were not allowing anyone to go visit with these folks. And I was just blown away by the miracle of modern technology and how God used FaceTime of all things over an iPad. And as his consciousness sort of he came in and out of that. Even as I got on FaceTime, I was able to read the word to him. And as I was reading Psalm 23 to him, saying, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he came out of his unconsciousness and started to speak the words with me. And to me, that wouldn't have been possible without technology. Think about what they would have done before the advent of the internet and all the things that we have today. How, if they had locked things down the way they are, would we be able to preach the word of God or bring the word of God to people in those hurting situations?
We found, Brandon, I liked how you said it's an act of faith and trust in the Spirit that He's going to do what He says He's going to do with His word. And the guys here in the room who know me, I will focus then immediately into, like in our Wally language, the core 3 stuff and the practical skills. And so the fastest thing we learned was like how terrible our mix was, because it was, again, secondary. And we weren't mixing in stereo, and God gave us 2 ears. And if people are listening on earbuds or through their sound systems at home, like, let's get that right. And so guitars are in stereo, keyboards are in stereo, just stuff like that. We adjusted all the camera angles, like I said. And then the next thing that had to do with the engagement side of stuff is we've taken on this language of, like, since we're made for TV right now and we don't have to be in the room, what are we going to do now since we don't have to be in the room? And so we regularly go on location for scripture readings. We're on Sermon on the Mount, and so we filmed in a big auditorium every one of our scripture readings, and cinematically with cameras walking around while he's doing his thing. And then, spoken word bumper with lyric graphics and sort of stuff that we otherwise wouldn't do because we're in the room. And we're just taking this, let's say the same stuff we would say, but since it's made for TV, let's really, really step into that. And it's been fun. Like, I got to tell you, we've really enjoyed that a lot. And then we try to sprinkle that throughout the 45-minute to an hour service so that there's a little something different. And so if you got up to grab coffee, like, what? He's up on a hill right now. What's this? This is different. What's he going to say now? Sort of stuff. And so, yeah.
One of my favorite things that has come out of this has been worship collaboration. Our church, we've been blessed to be able to do that with 2 local churches around here, Good Shepherd Lutheran over across the bay, and then Lutheran Church of the Holy Spirit, which is my home church up in San Francisco. It's both of those churches are, they've been producing high quality content, so they had the technical capabilities for us to just walk in, play some music together, and be able to capture that in their own way. That has been really neat, just because in pre-COVID, we wouldn't have had as many opportunities to worship together like that with our brothers and sisters around our area. And it was last weekend when we were at my home church, it was emotional for me too, because my fiance and I got to lead worship with my youth leader, my DC growing up, and then a high schooler that I had mentored when I was there. And that was really neat to be able to come together. And that's the spirit of the Lord bringing that together, to be able to bring worship to both of our congregations. That was a huge positive for me in this time.
Joel, I really enjoyed what you shared there, and the fact that I think we discovered we recorded worship because we felt that was the best way, the highest quality we could provide is by recording. But to keep in mind what it's like to sit at home every week and watch the service, and how could we keep it fresh for people. And I think people really enjoyed the sense of seeing other faces within that worship time that they hadn't been seen over the months. So they got so excited when they saw some other faces and could really relate to that in their worship time. It was more personal for them, I believe, when they were able to see that. And I think how you do some of the readings and things in a different environment, I think that's just really exciting to have that happen.
That's so true. It reminds me of one of the quotes from the podcast that we've listened to, and Richard Kemmerer, he says, "We need not bid farewell to the things we treasure. If we treasure them, that proves they have a place. Uniformity is nothing in itself unless it to be in a simplicity of the worship that is in spirit and truth. Everything else is a tool to that end. And he is the master who is not suffocated by his tools, but wields them for a purpose." And I think that's what I hear a lot of you guys saying is, especially in these last 7 months, it's like we have these elements that we're supposed to do in worship, and we have these tools, and how are we going to wield them for people that are sitting at home watching on their TV or on their phones in their bedrooms, or on a plane even, or in a car and stuff like that? How are we going to bring the word of God to these guys, and what's the most important way to do that? Which I think is a huge task, and something that a lot of us were just kind of thrown into immediately, completely transition from this idea. Joel Ash brings up this idea of incarnational and excarnational, and the idea there, incarnational ministry being embodied in person in the flesh, and this excarnational, is the out of body engagement here. And I guess the question here for me, I know the struggles at our ministry was all of a sudden all of our activity, all of our ministry ended up being online engagement, live streaming. What used to be just a kind of like an afterthought became the main purpose, and became the only way we were reaching out to people, telling people about the gospel. And I guess the question for you guys is, what incarnational ministries has your church been missing during this season? What's the feedback you've been getting where it's just like, I really miss this part about church in person? And then the other thing would be, has anything surprised you guys right now that they aren't missing? The feedback that you aren't getting, that you thought for sure, everyone is going to miss this, but they haven't been missing that.
I want to jump in on a dichotomy that we're experiencing over the same sort of thing is I don't know if we're allowed to step into the communion online or at home in person sort of thing or whatever. But that's been a thing where certainly coming around the altar for communion is something they've missed. We've been allowing people to do that at home, and have also added drive-in communion. And then anytime we've gathered for large outdoor type services, we've been sure to include communion so that we had that experience. But no one has said we missed that communion takes 17 minutes, cycling through everything. And as the producer, Brandon, to your language earlier, the producer of online content, when you're doing putting together a plan for service and you need 5 songs to get everybody through, and then you sit there, nobody has said, wow, we missed that communion. It takes 17 minutes. maybe not at all what you were looking for, but boy, that's just in the same issue. On one hand, there's this, and on the other hand, there's this. So we miss it, but we don't miss it like that much. We miss it this much. We miss the quality of it, not the quantity of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That and then the lobby. My gosh, people miss the lobby and the coffee and donuts and stuff. So that's, yeah.
I second that, Joel. I think for us, so we were unable to hold any sort of worship service for the first month or two of the pandemic because we didn't have technology here to facilitate that. So we pushed all of our worshiping body to worship together with St. John's in Orange and utilize their services. So in a sense, back to what Brandon said earlier, it almost broke down the walls that we sometimes build between our churches, and there was a greater sense of ecumenical unity that happened there, which was cool. But I think people started to miss seeing their friends face to face, those people that they had developed relationships over the years. So when we had our first outdoor worship service on the first weekend in June, it was almost like a family reunion. And it was really cool. We did have to remind people, stay 6 feet apart, wear your masks, and please don't touch each other. But it was really, really cool because you got to see people had missed that usness that comes with being a part of the body of Christ.
I was amazed at how much people just wanted to be in the church. They just miss being in the building. And I was like, wow, but there was such a huge attachment for people to be in the space. And that was a real important connection for them. But the same thing, though, it was that relationship, seeing their friends, seeing each other. And that was just a huge loss for people. They just were so hungry for that.
Yeah, for us here at Redeemer, it's the same as that, Kim. Is if you asked this question probably 3 months ago or 4 months ago, people might have said, "Online church is so cool. This is so new and fresh." And now it's nothing has changed about the fact that people need people. It's coming more and more to the forefront now that we need each other. We need to see each other. We need to be in relationship with each other, and we're really, really, really missing that. But I will say, I believe our members don't miss our coffee because they can make it themselves at home, however they like it, and have it in their pajamas on the couch.
At least that's true at our church. French press Sunday mornings, love it.
I do want to, I hope I'm not derailing this, but I was just blown away by Brandon, y'all's song that you put out, 2 weeks ago, that you guys did, and the way that was shared online. I think people are more bold in this pandemic to share content, share their faith on an online platform. I don't know that I saw that before the pandemic. And so, yeah, thank you, Brandon, and all of your friends for putting that out there. I think the ministry we may never know the impact things like that are having.
No, we were blown away too. I'll tell you what, if we weren't all in our own churches, because every single person in that video is involved in serving in worship in their own churches. On this song that we did was a cover of a song called "Another in the Fire" that we did with our friends through our music group Tribe and Tongue. And if we were not in a season of producing online content and maybe even collaborating with other churches, we would not have thought to do this. We would have been so busy with everything else that this collaborating together, bringing together friends from college who are now serving in other parts of the country, it wouldn't have been on our radar if it wasn't for this.
Yeah, I agree. I think to Nathan's point, throughout these months, I've seen so much collaboration between friends and people across the country, across the world. And what an awesome tool that is to be able to come together and to feel that unity together, and to use our gifts. I think that's so huge. And Brandon, you guys have produced a couple of those things throughout the time. I know you guys did one with your city and the whole church in San Francisco. You guys, what was the name of that song?
That was a cover of The Blessing that we did across the entire Bay Area.
Yeah, and that was just a huge, I mean, how cool is that? That was really neat to see all those worship leaders praying over their city and offering that blessing for the city and for the people there that live in that region. I think it was super powerful for me when I watched that video as well. And maybe this kind of tends into this next question. It's twofold, okay? So how have you been attempting to continue the community that you had before COVID within your volunteers and the teams that you had, as well as how have you been trying to manage your own burnout and fatigue? I think for me, for sure, there's been many moments where it just seems like the trauma of this whole season has been never ending. And, within the same hour of a similar day, my head is spinning 20 different directions. And so I think I've had to remind myself many times, like I got to figure out how to self-care here in this time. I got to figure out how to do this. And not only that, but then, the Lord usually points me of like, if you're feeling this way, imagine how your team is right now. So I guess I will throw it to you guys and just kind of hear your thoughts and ideas.
Our team here at Redeemer, we're a smaller, maybe a small, medium-sized church, but I guess that's all sort of relative. My confession is that, for a long time, I didn't use many people on my team, maybe zero. On our volunteer team, it was our staff team, our ministry team of about 5, between the pastors and everyone else on our team. My fiance Allison came on board our team part-time to do communications and office things, and she helped me with a lot of production. And in the beginning, it was a lot of go time. This is new. We got to get church going, and so it was easier to just do it ourselves. And so for a very long time, it was just us. And so that is my confession, that it should have been more team from the beginning, because now the burnout is I can't keep doing this on my own. We need teams and we need people. And yet I guess the balance of that is it takes time and work to incorporate people on team and to have them come on board. But I think the question is it worth it? And I'm learning in the big picture, in the long run, the answer is absolutely yes. That's unavoidable.
Brandon, ours was similar at first with us being multi-campus, and we were having a single broadcast point to reach all 3 of our campuses. We had all 3 of our pastors involved every week in some capacity, and we had we felt the need. I felt the need as the department director to make sure that all of our worship leaders were seen taking part in the role. So between me, 3 worship leaders and a choir director, 4 spots in the band and the worship team, for the sake of the staff leadership connection to the body, was consumed, or those slots were filled, let's say. And then we were trying to limit the exposure stuff, obviously, way at the beginning too. And it's like, well, look, if we're going to run in circles and everybody's locking down, we have to be here. We want to be here to fulfill our ministries and our callings and our mission in our life, And then I love big band stuff. So it's like 2 electrics, 2 acoustics, percussion, drums, keys, synth, piano, violin, cello, 4 singers. So we had the same 13 people and spent all sorts of time together. And a blessing from that has been like, gosh, we just recorded Tuesday night and we're recording live stereo tracks, no mix down. And just, I'm blown away by the talent that we've built and the fun and the community that we've had. And now little by little over time, we're folding other people into the mix, both on the technical side and in the music side of things, for sure. So what we did, finally, long answer, was like we had Thursday night rehearsal times. There were Zoom calls every Thursday night for anyone in the bands and worship teams who wanted to just see each other in what would have been a slot that they would have been scheduled in routinely. And, the choir even tried singing one time, and it was like, Zoom is not a virtual choir platform. Stop it, but they at least got to talk and see each other. So we really did that sort of thing. Yeah.
Same thing, Joel. Usually, during the summer, handbells, choir, we take a break. But since March, our regular rehearsal time, we have Zoomed. And yeah, the choir tried the singing thing, and it just does not work. One was just adamant, had to try it. But what I found interesting, because of our older population, the comment came out from them. It was like, we so look forward to this Wednesday night time together. It was just part of their life that they looked forward to. And so there's times I wanted to go, oh, can we take a break, And, but I thought, no, we can't, because it filled such an important role and connection and community to the church for them. So, we kept it going and still do it. So it was good.
Yeah, Kim, that's awesome. I think leveraging Zoom to create community was definitely a necessity. I think for us at Peace, it was interesting early on, because coming in to be a new pastor in this church, I couldn't visit with people, and so for me, I realized that a large section of my first couple months here needed to be just picking up my phone and talking to people who were here. Something that maybe in pre-pandemic times I wouldn't have had time for, or my schedule. And so it was almost like that came to the top. No, I'm going to carve out an hour or two each day and get on the phone and just ask people how they're doing. And I was blessed. I think more than any of them were on those conversations. So it was pretty cool. Personally, that's a different thing, right? Like, how do we manage fatigue, Matt? I think that's what you asked earlier. And doesn't it feel like we're constantly being just barraged by constant stuff on our phones, and the news cycle's constantly going? And it's how do we make time in our life for margin? I think those things in our life that refill us. For me, I struggle with it. But for me, it's exercise. So if I'm not getting out and making that a priority in each and every day, then I start feeling that anxiety and that stress start building up. So I don't know what it is for you guys, but.
Yeah, I agree with that, Nathan, too. It's that physical. For me, it's been bike riding, those hour bike rides that just really let you clear your head and prepare yourself for the day. And I think that's a really important part for us, is the physical activity.
Yeah, I've definitely tried that. I am not an active person by any means. My physical activity consists of moving gear around for reducing. So, but when we've been in the pandemic, we have so much time on our hands. So that has been a great, and I don't know the science behind it, but that was very helpful for me too, being able to, or not being able to, but being encouraged to do those things.
Yeah, for sure. One of those things is we're talking about that incarnational thing. So, we don't want to make our faith purely excarnational. We're not intended to live solely online. The church is in its nature incarnational. We're supposed to be there together in person. We embody the grace there, and we remind ourselves of who Christ is in our lives and what he's given us. So how do we wrestle moving forward, with these tensions where, okay, well, now I've kind of started an online church. We have a whole nother campus of a whole lot of people that are receiving the word, but also, we're slowly opening the doors back again. I know, Brandon, you guys aren't yet, but we're taking steps through moving forward, and people are coming back on campus. So how do you guys weigh or wrestle with those tensions moving forward? Has your leadership been talking about it, or your ministry teams?
We actually have an idea that we've been kicking around our ministry team. And maybe, Matt, your question more so for the immediate future. We have this idea for the long future. Here in the Silicon Valley around Redwood City, we have a highly unchurched area. We've even met high schoolers who know nothing about Jesus. So they can't oppose Jesus because they know nothing about him. And it was so fascinating to us to meet someone like that. So there's a whole wide range of people here when it comes to how they feel about Jesus and the Christian church. And so one idea we've been throwing around is, what if we took excarnation ministry and incarnational ministry together? And what if we didn't have in-person church once a month, and instead we produced church and encouraged people to have church at home and invite their neighbors and their friends, and to start having community so people can, so to speak, meet a Christian that they like, and to start being missional as an entire body, not just as a ministry and as an organization, but everyone in our body being missional in their communities where they're called to.
That may constitute a mic drop. Like, I'm not sure if anybody else can even say anything. That's such a stellar idea,
I can't take credit for that one.
Matt, anytime there's a tension, I always think of it as a tug of war, and someone's going to end up in the mud. And Kim, you mentioned, cycling, I think, here just a few minutes ago. And so I've tried to turn tensions into a bicycle crankshaft. And if you think of trying to go up a hill, like with one foot, or I don't know if when you were a kid, you ever took one foot off and you tried to do one of these things, and it's just like, you don't get anywhere. You look totally stupid doing it like that. Missional, attractional, modern, contemporary, missional, attractional, modern, blended, all these tensions. And it's like, what if we just use whatever is necessary whenever it's necessary, and get into a stride where we stop tug of war and turn it into both and sort of thing. And how that's going to look for us, I wish I had a little more clarity. Our online thing has been the only connection point across 3 of our campuses, and new people. We know of new people who had never been in any of our buildings and have been watching online. And once we're open without restrictions, do we go back to broadcasting a live experience, or do we keep a pre-recorded experience? Because that's what we've been doing, and consider it a separate campus. So we've got a 3-prong incarnational campus sort of thing happening, and this other online only, which hopefully eventually would be inviting someone into a physical community that's close to them. That's what we're wrestling with. Is it a 4th separate thing, or is it a representation of one of the 3 things? And it might be both and, I don't know. By the way, I have a good recipe for Mexican Italian that you blend the 2 together. If anyone wants to stop fighting about that, just.
One thing that I think I've been wrestling with, and there's a coworker that I work with here that talks about the difference between online church and then in-person church that we do. As you guys ever turn on or have an Apple TV where you turn on the Fireplace app on there? Have you ever done this before? Like, it's entertaining for a little bit, and it can kind of fulfill that need. I lived in a place without a fireplace when I moved to Tempe, Arizona, and that's all I had. So it was kind of this cool thing. But it doesn't really replace the sitting there in front of the warm glow of an actual wood burning fireplace. And so it's like, that's kind of an apt illustration for the tension I think I feel personally with this. Is I want to still create content for people to be impacted where they are, to share the gospel in their communities. But at the same time, I want them to come and experience that warm glow of what we have when we are actually together. Because I do believe there's something something more that happens when we gather together physically around God's word.
You know, so funny, Nathan. Right away, I'm like, well, if you add a space heater and make sure the sound is up, then you fulfill a few more of the senses at least, man. Like, you're only firing on one of the 3 cylinders.
Of course you would. Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, never mind. That's not the point here.
Yeah, and if you need a smoky smell, we have plenty of smoke here in California. There. We can share with you.
Thanks for destroying my metaphor. That's good.
Oh man, Kim, are you good? I'll move on.
Yeah, I think the same. Yeah, it's kind of the same tense that we, want to continue both. I mean, we're just slowly coming back right now. And so we still have many who will not be attending. But I think it's also a struggle once you start in-person worship. You're not only, before you would just think about how I'm going to do worship here. Well, now you have to think about, okay, but how's that going to look? Well, for live streaming. So you look at things a little differently in how you do things in your regular worship too. So you're thinking 2 different ways as you do worship. So I think you try to be sensitive to both.
Yeah, for sure. I've got 2 more questions, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. But this first one is, what's one thing that you guys started in your ministries during this time that maybe you realized you should have been doing all along? Or as you were doing it, you were like, you know what, we're really going to continue this moving forward for sure. You may not know exactly how it's going to be done, but something that you started during this time that was like, oh, I should have been doing this. Like, why wasn't I doing this before?
For us, we started doing texting in attendance. We used to always fill out the cards, are you here? And now they can text that if they're at home or if they're in the worship center. And it's like, wow, we should have been doing that, earlier, but it works.
I love making videos. I started dabbling that when I was in high school, and now our ministry is moving resources to that area because we believe we can continue to create high quality, engaging content that lasts beyond an event. But the thing that for me that I believe we should continue doing is to teach kids how to use those, because we have kids around our ministry who serve in a lot of different capacities, and if it's definitely their language that they're growing up with their social medias and their YouTubes, and so I see a great opportunity to empower them to use their language and their gifts that they're really interested in using to be a part of innovating new ways to reach people in digital ministry.
This is kind of and I second that, Brandon. We started making a ton of video content. I don't think that's going away, just because it's reached people where they're at, and we're seeing an impact there. The interesting thing for us is we started worshiping outside when this thing started, and Peace is situated within a neighborhood community here. And it has one of the only green spaces with tall trees out there that people like to visit. It's almost a community park, if you will. And so we've actually seen entire groups of people from the neighborhood coming to church because they feel comfortable coming to a place that's not inside of a building, but they go all the time. So I've had one of my elders, he said, hey, after this pandemic, can we just do worship outside like every single summer? I'm like, we got to get done with this pandemic first. But I actually think he's onto something there. I think it's a good idea that we can reach people using some of these things that God stretched us with throughout the pandemic.
Nathan, we had the same thing. in a couple different settings, and I was sitting here trying to think of like, what am I going to say that's not something I've already said before? And when you said the outdoor space and the community, our church is blessed with, we have 40 acres of land out in the middle of the farmland, and 10 of those 40 acres is open and nicely mowed. The other 30 being farmed by local farmers in the meantime. And August 28th and 29th, we decided to have this thing we called Summer Night Out. And like we put together a car show, had 2 bands, food drive, and free food. We had 1,200 pounds of food donated, $700 cash type thing. And then we had cars that were driving by, and they're like, "Ooh, I've got a sweet car. I'm going to pull in. This looks like fun." And I met a guy named Chuck, who is a historical critical type approach. The Bible doesn't make sense because I can't reconcile it in my mind, who was driving a $140,000 white Porsche that was custom ordered and built for him. And he and I stood and talked. I got his number. We had lived in Panama, kind of together, like this crazy small world. And I would have never met that guy had we not taken a step to go outside. And we've discovered too that we're going to do that again. I'm thinking Father's Day weekend, like from pandemic or not, car show on Saturday, bands, Sunday morning outside worship. You've maybe seen our pictures. We ran a big line array sound system. And now my church finally understands how crappy our sound system has been, which is like a total bonus too. Twice now they've said, "How much would that cost for us to have?" And I was like, "I'm glad you asked that question. Why do you think we've been renting it?" So,
that's great.
Long term.
Yeah. That's so true. In my personal
Am I allowed to
life,
say crappy, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. I feel like
all right.
that's real. We're all sinners here. The one of the things in my personal life when this thing first hit, my nature is almost, firsthand is to see the faults, is to see the problems, is to see the things that you could complain about. And I feel like in my personal life, the last 7 months has been a real season of God continuing to show me to count my blessings, for a better use of the phrase, but just to be mindful and to consciously remember the blessings that He's given me in this time, or that I've had in my ministry during this season, or how He's led me here. You know what I mean? It's like every step in my ministry has prepared me for this moment. And I guess the question for you guys too is, what are some of those blessings that you have had that have come out of this time for you personally? Whether that's within your ministry or just, even just personally through your family and stuff like that.
I think for me, there has been a blessing of being not forced, but to really develop some closer relationships, especially with people that you couldn't connect. And so you found yourself somewhat like Nathan said, you just take time out of your day to get on that phone, which we tend not to want to do anymore. We'd rather do a text or an email, but to take that time and to just call someone and talk with them and really discover where they're at, and really probably have developed a much deeper and a longer relationship with them because of it.
Time at home with the family for the first several months was amazing. I was the designated runner at our house. I was the only one that was leaving. And then a lot more gatherings just out in the middle of our street here with neighbors. Put one fire pit out in the middle of the street, literally, and just gather around with, red Solo cups and just hanging out, and good times there. On the relational side, on the work side, I love new challenges. And yeah, you guys who know me, after 23 years of 52 Sundays a year, I've really enjoyed some of the massive curveballs, just to like figure out a new challenge of something I hadn't done before. And so professionally, that's been super invigorating. So between lockdown at home with my family and the neighbors and reinvigorated with new challenges at work, that's just been a blast, actually.
Yeah, I'd say for me personally, I resonate with that, Joel. For our family, we rediscovered the family meal. I can't tell you how busy our lives were before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit pause, like a hard pause that forced us to really value that nightly connection as a family, which has just been chaotic and fun at the same time when you get the whole family together around the meal. And yeah, it's always fun to check in at the end of the day. I think for us as a church, it's been an interesting season at Peace. We actually have seen a bit of growth. Before the pandemic, we had, I think, right around 25 to 30 people in worship. And for the month of August, we were over 100 every single week, which has been a cool thing because it actually allowed our church to almost hit pause for a couple months. And then when we restarted, we started working our way through some of the practices of the early Christian church in Acts, and to rediscover what does it mean to be the church for our community in Tustin, which has been really, really cool to see what God's doing as our members invite people from like their neighbors to come to church and things like that they probably haven't done in years. So that's a blessing that's come out of it for us.
I'll share a quick personal story, if that's okay. And this time has been a huge blessing to me. My parents became baptized Christians when I was in college, and so they weren't Christians when I started on my path of serving at church a lot and then going to college for full-time ministry. And so I imagine it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But being able to do online church, they've been able to watch every single Sunday. And they get to see and be proud of the things that I'm doing. And my dad, he's so funny. He has his little wooden tripod that he made himself, and he puts his phone up and records the TV. And then he sends that recording over to our family in China because they can't open YouTube and Facebook links. And so I'm able to honor them because they get to see the things that I'm doing, and because they don't go to church with me every single Sunday and I don't live with them anymore. So that has been a huge, huge blessing for me, and I thank God for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Guys, I just want to, before we say goodbye, I want to thank you for your time today. Thanks for just kind of speaking into this past podcast episode and lending your wisdom and your experience to all of us who are listening or watching this podcast. Yeah, thank you so much. And, we'll see you down the road. Good blessings on your ministries, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah.
Good to be with you guys,
Matt.
too, as well, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for the very first episode of On the Ground Floor, which is a part of the Center for Worship Leadership's podcast network. I hope you guys were encouraged by the conversation as much as I was, and stay tuned for our next episode coming in October. If you want to get a head start, make sure to listen to the Theology of Beauty episode featuring Mark Mattis on our sister podcast, Theology in Motion. Now, on behalf of the Center for Worship Leadership and this episode's Ground Floor panel, we are glad that you are here, and we will see you next month on the Ground Floor.